we have been talking about the revolution and the fight for independence. And so now, you know, we declared our independence, July 4th. But now what? What does it mean now to be independent? And what do we have to deal with? And what are the changes? That's what we're going to be looking at now. And what we're really saying is the moment we declared our independence from the king, that meant we were no longer under his rules and regulations. We didn't have a governing authority because we got rid of one. So now we had to reestablish how were we, as these now states, not colonies, we are now states, the United States of America. Now how are we going to rule ourselves? What will be our government? We don't have a king anymore, and that's what we're looking at now. Here is part of our vocabulary. And so after independence was declared, each state had to create their own state government. Because remember, these states were royal colonies. And again, what that means is the colony was under the authority of the king. So now we've thrown off the king. We are not under the king's authority. And so how are each state going to function? How are they going to get revenues and tax money and what kind of laws, and are they going to have a governor? Are they going to have a representative body? None of that was clear. So immediately after independence was declared, and look at that word, declared, not won at the end of the war, but declared. Each state had to create state governments by creating constitutions. In these constitutions, for the states, governors were the chief executive, appointed by key state officials. But most of the power was always in the hands of the legislatures and the assemblies. One note, New Jersey was the only state that gave women the right to vote, and then they rescinded it. Virginia's state constitution, Virginia was really a hotbed of a lot of the revolutionary ideas, you know, Paine and Jefferson, and so they contained a Bill of Rights. And the motivation for the Bill of Rights was a real reaction to the things they thought that the king had violated. Their inalienable rights that the king ignored, the rights given to them by God that the king totally dismissed. And so Virginia decided, we're going to ensure that these rights will never be taken, that we're going to put them in our Constitution. The freedom of religion, the freedom of press, the trial by jury, limits on searches. Remember the acts where they could search, and limits on arrests, no cruel and unusual punishment. And you will see some of the punishments, especially during the Revolutionary War, were really terrible. And the Declaration of Independence listed the rights the king violated, and the state wanted to ensure these are our rights and they will be put in our Constitution. But it's fine for each individual state, how are they going to run? But now these states have said we will be a union, and we need to have a governing body. So here's our union, a governing body, a system of how this union was going to work with each other. These different states were going to work with each other. So the document they came up with, the government they came up with, was called the Articles of Confederation. And in 1777, just a year later, because they had no government, the king was gone, they came up with this document. It had only one branch of government. It had a legislature where representatives from the different states would come. And all the states had only one vote, whether you had a state with a large population or a small, one vote. Most of the power was left in the hands of the states. The states could choose and do an awful lot of things. And Congress, this legislative, this one branch of this government, it was there, but it couldn't collect taxes and it couldn't regulate trade. So how was this government going to function if they couldn't get tax money or money to run the government with? Congress, some of the powers Congress did have this one branch government, was they could deal with foreign nations and with Native Americans outside of the 13 states. The states still had the authority within their boundaries. It could make laws. The Congress could declare war. It could coin and borrow money, and it could run a postal service. But the government had no power to enforce the laws they made. So it would be as if you were given a curfew by the adult in your house, and you come in 4 hours after that curfew, and the adult in your house couldn't do anything about that. That's what it was like for Congress, for this government. Now, because the government really didn't have a lot of power, there were a lot of growing pains within the states and how do we function now. And there were some problems that came up that really pushed the now states to say, we need to relook at this government over the states we have set up, the Articles of Confederation. And here are some of the things that really impacted a relooking at the Articles. Americans concluded that the Articles did not give the government enough power to solve their problems. For example, economic problems. Congress couldn't tax. So each state had their own tax laws. So one state, let's say North Carolina had their own tax laws. You go up to Virginia, let's say, to get supplies or to sell your things, and it's a totally different set of tax laws. And so who regulates this? How do you keep track of it? Foreign affairs. America, just because we said we were independent from the king, well, show us. The other countries are like, in a sense, you know, let your walk be your talk. If you say you're independent, show us how you can be independent. And in Massachusetts, after we declared independence and we're trying to fight this war, this was happening at the same time, there was a huge depression, and the Massachusetts farmers could not pay the tax that the Massachusetts legislature said that they had to pay. And so these farmers got together and they started as a militia, and they started to protest. And the state was in a place where we might lose, you know, we can't control this protest. We can't control these farmers. And the state had no authority above them. No, the national government in the Articles of Confederation had no legal power to assist and help Massachusetts put down Shays' Rebellion. And so they were thinking, you know, when things get out of control, we need something bigger than us. We need a federal, a national government that can manage the states. Why were the Articles so weak? Well, what we didn't like about the British, we didn't have representation in the Parliament. No taxation without representation. So the reaction when they created the Articles was, well, the government just won't have the right to tax. And it was a kind of a dramatic response to how the king treated them. A large central government, monarchy, had all the power. Power was not shared. So they decided that if the state didn't want to follow the law that Congress passed, the state didn't have to. There was a real reaction to the idea of absolute power. States always had to listen to the king. They always had to abide by ultimately what the king said. In the Articles, states had their own laws. They did not have to follow another state's law. They could just say and do what they wanted to say and do. All power was in the king's hand. We talked about that before. And so here in the Articles, they said, we don't want a major executive. We don't want somebody like that in charge because the king screwed us. And then the king could, at whim, change the laws or the rules in his absolute power. And any change in the federal government, in the Articles, all 13 states had to agree with. So it was, the Articles of Confederation were written reactionary mode towards what they experienced with the king. And then we will continue on with the next time, talking about what happened because of the weakness.